guys of Minnesota sports flowing in their veins. Mackie and Judd on SKOR North and SKORNorth.com.
Mike, last night we were asking him about the timeouts. You guys had one left at the end of the first half, and he said that was something he typically doesn't ever mess with that. He said that's on coaching.
That's my fault.
Does he have the ability?
It was a miscommunication. He has the ability, but that was miscommunication. I won't get into it, but there was a miscommunication, and we're trying to get on the ball. A receiver lined up wrong, and took too much time.
Oh my God! What are we calling this now? Timeout gate?
I love the gate.
Timeout gate?
The Watergate Hotel, man, has how key. What if it had been the Holiday Inn? What would the name be then?
Yeah, you would. Yeah,
like the Motel 6. Like if those files, if Nixon's people had broke into the Motel 6.
Hey, what if it was a Red Roof Inn?
Yeah, what would we call
Motel 6 gate?
Like,
I don't know. It's a good question.
Roofing gate? Like that's yeah.
I guess
it was the Watergate Hotel.
You don't want your brand attached to a gate, right?
No.
Well,
it's the last thing you want.
I don't even I'm so sick of these two. These two guys, think about the things that the top quarterback coach combinations worry about on a weekly basis. It's like high level calculus stuff, right? You guys remember, by the way, Mackie and Judd, daily Minnesota sports entertainment or therapy. Welcome into the show. We'll get to who gets it, who doesn't. We'll get to random season recall. But do you guys remember that Facebook Tom Brady documentary that came out? It was a 6-part series. Yeah. And it basically followed him in hyperbaric chambers and all of his crazy training TB12 methods. Actually, you know what? I might be mixing up documentaries. There was an NFL Network one that was Bill Belichick focused and Tom Brady. I think that's the one I'm thinking of, where it showed those guys watching film together.
That's a great, yes. And Tom, I think Tom would stop in his office on Mondays, right? And they talk for a long time.
Yeah, they would just sit in there. They would kind of go over the previous week, but they would focus ahead. And there was a scene where they're looking at the Ravens defense, right? And Bill Belichick's just, oh man, that Ed Reed, he's just mumbling to himself. But they're talking like high level football calculus about how to trick Ed Reed, because Ed Reed is able to see inside their souls, right?
Yes.
Mike Zimmer and Kirk Cousins can't even figure out who's supposed to call timeout and when during a 2-minute drill.
Mm-hmm.
And you wonder why the Vikings underachieve year after year, why they're under 500. There's several factors involved here, but if your head coach and your quarterback in the most crucial moments of games, which is end of the half, right? First half, second half, chance for you to get an extra possession, extra points, whatever, and they can't figure out who's supposed to call timeout. Just end it.
But here's the incredible thing. So when you look at this entire situation between these two grown men, quarterback and a coach, okay? I love people who always say, Mackie and Judd and Declan now too, SKOR North is guessing. They're just spitballing. They don't know what they're talking about. And they're guessing about things. And, Purple Pride and Skull and these guys, I'm going to go somewhere else and get my Vikings content. And the reality is, we've said for how long that it's clear these two need a divorce. Like, it doesn't work between them.
When you've been a therapist in Minnesota sports for as long as we have, a certified therapist, you know what a strong couple looks like, and this is not a strong couple.
The smartest thing that my late father told me years ago, and he would just say this, was common sense. Use common sense. Like, common sense will lead you down the right path to figuring out what. And when you watched Kirk and Mike, pretty early on, common sense said, I don't think these two get along or are on the right page, and they certainly don't have the cohesiveness that Phil you talk about a lot, and it's very true, between quarterback, especially good to great QB, and head coach, right? So how long have we talked about this, that they need a divorce? Like, I'm tired of I'm getting very sick of my bills as a sports therapist for trying to dissect something that for years now we've said just doesn't work. It doesn't work. And when you have these two going back and forth, and among the sports cliches / excuses, where does miscommunication rank. It's the greatest catch-all of all time.
But like I'm okay with like miscommunications are going to happen. If it's a miscommunication about a coverage that we talked about during the week, and God, I thought it was this, and I said this, or it was a miscommunication about the play. Like, all right, that's a bullets are flying football miscommunication. There should never be a miscommunication about who's in charge of a 2-minute drill, and you know who it should be? Kirk Cousins.
And there wasn't. Mike's lying. There was no. Kirk Cousins was in charge, and Kirk Cousins didn't. And because I watched that entire sequence live, and he was flustered as could be. He didn't know the guy now, because I do think that this is true. The receiver lines up wrong, and Kirk goes from being like sort of in control to, oh my God, the house is on fire. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? There was no miscommunication there. Kirk didn't call the timeout and then blamed Mike because, again, it comes back to the marriage is rotten. It doesn't work. And quit staying together for the kids because the kids are the fans, and the fans don't want you to stay together. They want you to get divorced. We'll go see on weekends, Mikey, okay?
Coming from a divorced family, it's actually kind of great. You know, it's like you get twice the presents. It's great. Exactly. Birthday presents. It's amazing.
That's what I've heard.
But let's keep drilling down here. And by the way, like, yeah, there was a million other things that led to the Vikings losing that game, and we're hyper focused on this one sequence at the end of the first half that may have been a 3-point swing, right? Like they weren't going to drive for a touchdown, but they had 25 yards to go to get in field goal range. It's a close game. I'm using this more as a microcosm for why the relationship, the most important relationship, is broken, and it's sort of festering into these other areas of the team, right? And I've seen a lot of people comment and say, well, if Mike Zimmer is being a micromanaging boss, which I think there's a case to be made there in some respects, but generally he's not micromanaging the offense. I think he has edicts for what he wants his offense to look like, but I don't think he's getting into like the granular nature of the offense. So I don't know that I would call him a micromanager. We're going to get Alex Boone on Purple Daily today, and he might have a better classification for what Mike Zimmer is because he's been in those rooms. But this notion that, well, Mike Zimmer is hoarding the timeouts and the responsibility, and he's not allowing Kirk Cousins to call timeouts. I don't believe that. I don't think that's true. Now, do I think, because he made a comment about Sheldon Richardson, because Sheldon Richardson tried to call timeout a few weeks ago, and they didn't have one left, and they got penalized, right? And so do I think he might have told his defense, guys, just stop. Like, let me handle this. But it's different when you're talking about a quarterback running a 2-minute drill. And I think where I get annoyed is if Mike Zimmer is at all not empowering his quarterback, who's 33 years old, been in the league for 10 years, to run the show in the 2-minute drill, then that's a Mike Zimmer thing. But equally concerning, if not more, is that your 33-year-old quarterback, who's the second or third highest paid player to the cap in the NFL, that he's pulling the, I just work here. I'm just doing what I'm told. He's either doing that to throw Mike Zimmer under the bus because everyone wants Mike Zimmer fired, or he's literally just, I just work here guy who makes, $40 million to the cap, which is equally problematic on both sides.
Here's where I don't care. Both of them are a lost cause in this one. I don't care who's responsible. I really don't. At this point, I don't give a damn because they both have the ability. Like, they're bleeping adults with control. They both, if they don't know, if they can't decide between them, if they're trying to parse out a timeout, it's over. The relationship is done. I'm done with it. I've been their therapist, and you know what? I'm firing them. I'm tired of the whole thing. I don't care. I don't.
You're fired.
I don't care who did what.
Mom and dad.
Yes. No, you two are fired. You two don't belong together. You move to Florida. You go to Arizona, and I want to be done with you. This whole thing, like the fact that we are having to parse through a timeout at the end of the first half in what was a brutal loss filled with brutal decisions. And just, hell, what I saw a quote, Xavier Woods, I think post game came out and talked about, we didn't prepare for Cooper Rush because Mike had told Tafoya, we watched a bunch of film of Cooper Rush. Woods said we prepared for Prescott. We didn't prepare for this guy.
Honestly,
what's he talking? But
they should have. But I'm fine with that.
I'm fine with that too. But like Mike felt it necessary to try and sell that Mike should have said we prepared for Prescott, and there's barely any film of rush. My point is these press conferences and finger pointing and who did what and clearly people just flat out lying to save their own skin. It's tiresome. It's counterproductive. And most importantly, if I'm the Wilfs, I'm just saying the whole come on, really?
Yeah. And in the end, I think everyone's record sort of speaks for itself. Like Kirk is like 8-19 in primetime games. Well, quarterbacks aren't you can't pin wins and losses on quarterbacks. Okay, well, Kirk's teams are like 8-19 in primetime. Kirk and Mike together the last 3+ seasons are something like 20 games below 500 against teams that finished the season with a winning record. It's embarrassing. Yeah. And so however the pie chart of blame works out to be, there's no win here. Like literally and metaphorically, like there's no win here. It's not working. It's not even working on a sneak into the playoffs level, because if the playoffs started today, guess what? The Panthers would be the 7th seed. The Vikings are out. So I'm just sick of it all, man. Like we're in year 8 of Mike Zimmer, and we're in, I'm going to say, year 7 of Kirk Cousins as an NFL starter. And you can only go so far down you just need another offensive lineman path. Like this is bigger than just like needing a new center.
Yes.
All right. It goes beyond that, because there's a lot of other flawed rosters out there, and teams are still finding ways to win games with their quarterback and with their head coach, and the Vikings aren't.
The one good thing now is finally, for the first time in a long time, finally everyone who follows this team from the outside is galvanized and can be one because of this. It doesn't matter who you like. So if you're a Kirk stan, it doesn't matter. If you're a Zimmer stan, it doesn't matter, because this team now is to that tipping point where parceling out, to do the pie chart again, right? Well, Kirk is 25% to blame, but Mike is 75%. It doesn't matter. The whole thing doesn't work. So we can all now stand as Vikings fans and followers. We can stand together, arms locked, and say, we don't care who's at fault, because everybody, for the most part, who is in charge of this thing has to go.
We can stand as one.
Exactly.
One Vikings nation. Listening to the Wild anthem.
The state of SKOR. The state of SKOR is galvanized. No more stands. If you're a Vikings fan, if you're a Vikings stan, you're done with the individuals.
All right, I this isn't to defend Mike Zimmer, but I will empathize with Mike Zimmer in this way. He tried to tell you in early February of 2018, and I wish I would have thought of this before the show so we could have queued up the audio, but he said, I think at the NFL Combine during his press conference, we need to be careful spending too much money on a quarterback if it takes away from the rest of the roster. That was his way of, because he knew that those discussions were happening with Cousins. Mm-hmm. And by the way, this is not to say that, like, because Mike said this, that Cousins is the problem. Like, Mike has had plenty of issues as a coach the last few years. And I think if you would have put Kirk Cousins with a more offensive-minded, like, do I think Kirk was ever destined to be Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers? No. A lot of people make the Drew Brees comparison, like, well, look, Drew Brees was 500 for his first, 60 games. And now, do I think if you were to put Kirk Cousins with Sean Payton or Andy Reid or Sean McVay or Kyle Shanahan, that there'd be a better version of him as a leader, as a 2-minute drill guy? Yes, I do think there's a better version of Kirk out there somewhere with a different coach that's not Mike Zimmer. But Mike, knowing that he's a defensive coach, he's got his way of wanting to build a football team. He told everyone almost 4 years ago, got to be careful with this. I'm not into this. I don't advocate for this. He couldn't flat out say, I don't think we should sign Kirk Cousins for $30 million guaranteed on a multi-year deal. But that's as close as he could come to publicly saying, this is happening. I'm not on board with it. And I just want to warn you all that this is going to take away, this might be a quarterback upgrade, but it's going to take away from the rest of the roster. And if you could take it a step further, he probably would have said, and I don't know that I'm going to get along with him because I don't think our personalities match. And the relationship was forced on Mike Zimmer, and it's been on him to make it work for the last 4 seasons. And if you go back to the blame game in Mike's court, and he's done a crappy job of making it work. The relationship is zero. And so ultimately it's like, dude, these are the groceries that you have to cook with. If I could steal a line from his favorite mentor, Bill Parcells, you got to fall in love with the groceries a little bit. You got to make them work. Mm-hmm. And he's never done that. So he never wanted Kirk to begin with, and it's very, very likely that relationship and just the weird nature of it is going to lead to the Vikings either not getting into the playoffs again or sneaking in and getting beat, and then will eventually lead to Mike Zimmer's demise. So I do empathize a little in that his demise is going to be tied to someone he never wanted to begin with.
Do you know, though, that in all of the things that went wrong in that loss, and I mean, we've dissected a ton, it was so bad and so embarrassing that we haven't gotten to the fact that Mike Zimmer's pride and joy, his calling card, one of the reasons why he got hired in the first place, got absolutely dissected by Cooper Rush. Okay, Patrick Peterson's a good player. His loss is a big deal. I'm not trying to say it's not. But nonetheless, we talked about this guy, Phil, on the old show for a long time. Mike Zimmer was what? The cornerback whisperer, right? Like, this guy developed them. He took Rhodes and took him from being a really nice player to being a star for a period of time. Trey Waynes, I don't think was as bad as people thought. He wasn't great, but he was certainly a serviceable corner who didn't embarrass himself. On Sunday night, Cooper Rush completely took apart both your corners and your nickel corner. And I would argue beyond Woods that Harrison Smith didn't have a great game. But your corners, the guys that we used to talk about, this is what Mike does. Like, you guys don't get what Mike does well. Dantzler, Breland, Alexander basically got done by Cooper Rush. And we barely talked about it because the game was so embarrassing in other ways and so bad.
Yes. And now after that dissection, the Vikings defense total yards per play, so all plays, running, passing, yards per play allowed, they're 23rd. Yards per pass attempt, they are 23rd. And yards per rush attempt, they are 28th.
Wow.
So if you just go on a per play basis, everything about this defense now after that Cowboys game, and it started to slip a little at the end of that Panthers game, everything about it says bottom 10, bottom 12 defense to this point.
Which is the one thing that they basically, I think, assured the Wilfs, we are going to, if we make these moves, we'll be back defensively.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to get worse now because I don't know how you get an effective pass rush with Hunter now gone for the season.
Now, they are 12th in scoring defense because they've been pretty good situationally. I think they're pretty good on third downs. I have to look that up, but
they weren't until Sunday.
Yeah, no, yeah, it was bad on Sunday.
They got dissected on Sunday,
and they must be decent in the red zone of just forcing field goals. But so they're 12th in points allowed, but it's a lot of bending, and then sometimes they break.
I think they were first in the league going into Sunday's game in third down defense, and then the Cowboys completely destroyed them.
Yep, I got that too here just for fun. So they're now 5th.
Oh, this
in
is
the
great!
NFL
This is great fun.
Defense. And then red zone percentage. So this is percentage of the time a team reaches the red zone and scores a touchdown. Oof. Okay. So they have the 8th highest red zone percentage. So that's not good. They're actually right in line with the Chiefs in terms of percentage of touchdowns allowed in the red zone.
Yeah, not good.
So yeah, man.
The Ringer every week does winners and losers each week from the NFL. They always grade 3 winners, 3 losers each week then they can be situations, plays, teams, etc. And they actually graded the Vikings in the losers category, but they looped in the refs too, or maybe both, because of the timeout gate, because of the back-to-back timeouts. And they also called Mike Zimmer basically. Mike Zimmer is basically Brennan and Dale from Step Brothers, asking their parents for permission to build bunk beds to provide extra space for activities, then crying and yelling at their parents for giving them permission when it was obviously a terrible idea. Just picture Mike Zimmer screaming, "There's blood everywhere. It's bad. Why'd you allow us to do this?" Not good.
In reference to the what? The timeout gate?
In reference to the back-to-back timeouts, yeah.
Like, that whole thing is just, you want your coach to be, like, you want to think that your coach is studying game theory and how to best preserve timeouts and work the clock, because these are such crucial, important situations. And then you find out that, like, they don't even know who's supposed to call timeouts, and then Zimmer forgets that he called one later. It's like, oh, God.
Well, I've always said this. It takes a special person to be adept at calling plays for an offense or defense and also running the game. So, which is why I've never been like a huge fan of the head coaches calling plays. And I'm sure that there's a small group of men who have the bandwidth and ability to successfully do it. And we've seen that. But if I am going to hire you to coach my team, the first thing I want is that you're going to coach my team.
Yeah.
And so, like, I'm sure Mike was so preoccupied with everything else. And I don't think he's a calm guy. And so at some point in time, something has to give. Unfortunately, with Mike, what we found is it's the clock, which is incredibly important. Like, you can't be like, well, I just sort of goofed up the clock today. Get them next time, boys.
Yeah. I'm trying to find. So there was an article. All right. There was an article on ESPN.com from like 2018. Because I guess my question is, how many NFL coaches call plays? And I think it's about half. As of 2018,
sounds right.
14 NFL head coaches are the offensive play callers. So it was, and this is when McCarthy was still with the Packers, Bill O'Brien with the Texans. You know, there's actually been a lot of changes to this list. Adam Gase with the Dolphins. So it's definitely, when you account for defensive play callers, it's definitely about half or over half. But God, I don't know, man. Like, and Mike Zimmer's proving it that he can't do both. He can't think about game situations. And then, by the way, whoever he has assigned to tell him what to do also doesn't know what they're doing. So it's that, like, whoever tapped him on the shoulder or got into his headphone and said, call a timeout, like, that guy's job has clearly, like, whoever that is has been told, I need you to help me manage, like, the game flow and the timeouts and the strategy. And it's like, and that guy doesn't know what he's doing. So, like, the whole thing is just effed. And now they're going on the road against the Ravens and Lamar Jackson. And there's half a chance they could win that game because they're the Vikings. And they do weird things like that. And Mike Zimmer's going to be probably working 23 hours a day to put together a game plan, you know, although Daniil Hunter's out. So
I think Kirk
changes things.
I think Kirk comes back and has a big day because, like, this is a Kirk rebound noon start, correct?
Yeah, but it's
a noon start.
Baltimore, dude.
Yeah, it's at Baltimore, but it's a noon start. He's not at home, so he can't be booed here. The pressure is like, well, they're not going to win, and so I think Kirk comes back, and offensively, I think they might score points. They might, but yeah, I think with Hunter out, my question comes back to this: where does the pass rush come from? Because Griffin's going to get doubled more now, and he's an old guy. Like, he's going to wear down. DJ Wanham, Kenny Willekes, Patrick Jones II, who has not played yet. Like, where does that – because Hunter, just by being on the field, changes games.
Sure.
Who exactly is going to be the complement to Griffin? And I don't think Griffin alone can come close to doing what he does when Hunter's on his left side, on that left end.
Well, we've got plenty more looking ahead. And also, I don't think we're done, like, looking back yet, because Alex Boone is going to join Purple Daily today. So check that out. And thank you guys for helping us set a record on Vikings Vent Line. It was the most consumed Vikings Vent Line in a 48-hour period in the history of the show. And if you haven't watched it or listened to it, Purple Daily Podcast, SKORNorth.com, Central Hub for everything we do. But also here on Mackie and Judd on Tuesdays, we dive into a little segment called Who Gets It and Who Doesn't.